My name is Sean Dilliot. I'm the service manager with Kearney Planters. We're a small company in southwestern Ontario. We're Kinsey dealers. We're Kinsey mainline dealers. We also buy and sell pretty well every make of planter out there. Our claim to fame is customization. That's what we do. We will do things that nobody else will ever even attempt to do. We sell all over Canada and all over the world. The first thing we're going to do is maintenance, and then we're going to do planter setup. From what I understand, one of the big things that these guys are trying to get their dealer network and everybody else to understand is when you guys get told that there's a problem with the seed and there's a problem with this or a problem with that, it's not always that problem, is it? Sometimes it goes back to the planter. And it's not just about the planter itself, is it? It's not about the setup in the field. Sometimes it's the setup in the shop or the maintenance schedule, right? Because let's face it, we all know some of these planters. You guys might not be running into it as much. Back where I come from, it's nothing to go to a farm, have a farmer out in a field with a very nice planter that could be possibly 35 plus years old. Nothing wrong with the planter, okay? So you guys are going to start getting into that, where you're going to have older planters out here, and it's common for us to bring a 25-year-old planter in, completely redo it, send it back out for another 20, 25 years. Nothing's really changed that much on a row unit. Yeah, the toys have, the precision toys have, the GPS and everything else, but the planter themselves have not changed very much. 80% of your setup should be done in the shop in the wintertime or in the spring or whenever it is you do that planter, whether you do that planter in the summertime or whatever, most of that setup should already be done. If you go to the field and you're trying to do 100% of the setup in the field, you're going to be in a real hurry. Are you going to do it properly? No, you're not. Part of the setup comes in basic maintenance, okay? And basic maintenance doesn't entail putting the pin in to back it in the shop and then taking the seed cans off and then putting the seed cans back on. And 90% of the farmers that don't like to work on maintenance, that to them is their maintenance. When we bring a planter in a shop, we want to go over it from top to bottom. We want to see, are the parallel linkages wore? The bushings underneath those? Are the bolts loose? Are the blades wore? How's the hydraulic system? How's the wiring system? How's the wire ties? All that stuff should be done. How's the frame? Is the frame cracked? Every year we go out and fix a planter sitting on its belly because something's broken. I still say most of the time that could have been prevented if the guy took a flashlight, and even in a bright shop like this, if you start looking over this frame and going underneath, you better have a flashlight, and you should be looking at that. I can tell you where certain makes of planters are going to break. Grease the planter. We talk about that in the maintenance in the field, but it should be greased in the shop in the wintertime. Because most of the time in the spring when you guys don't grease a planter, it's because it will not take grease. So if you don't get the grease gun out during maintenance and fix those problems on certain models, I'm going to be able to tell you exactly where they're going to break or crack or bend. The grease fittings are there for a reason. That is one of the things I preach like nobody else will. I see the result. We have had planters come in the shop. We are used to taking gauge wheels off. We had a white planter come in the shop 2 years ago. It took 2 guys 3 days just to remove these wheels off. 3 days. And we have the tools and the know-how. Did that guy ever get a grease gun out? Now let's go back on that thought. If it took us 3 days to get that off, was that working properly? These things are designed to go up and down for depth control. Did that planter have any depth control at all? You have to grease every planter every day. Now, if a planter like this, we all have to use common sense. If a planter like this goes out and plants 20 acres, do we have to grease it again? No. But if you've got a 4-row and you go out and plant 40 acres, that's a day. I've got a customer that owns a planter that's 25 years old, maybe even closer to 30. Went out and inspected it for him a couple years ago. It has the original clutch in it. Would look like brand new. He greases it every single day and he only plants 30 to 40 acres a day. He's never spent any money on maintenance on this planter to speak of. When you pull your planter in the shop, what's the first thing you guys all look for to check? But most people say the blades. Now, if you've got a planter like this and it's 14 5/8 and you're going to go out and plant 3,000 acres of corn, do you think you should leave them on or switch them? I've got 8-row planters eight row 30-inch planters in Ontario planting 25 to 3,500 acres a year. He should never go to the field with 14 and 5/8. And that's where you got to kind of look at what you're doing. If that same planter was going to the field and doing 500 acres, I'd say, yeah, no problem, let it go. But if you're going to do 3,000 acres with a planter this size and you're at 14 and 5/8, what happens is that blade thins up. Okay? So once it starts to go down in size, it's getting thinner very quickly. It will go really fast once it gets to 14 and 5/8. So you might want to rethink that. What is the problem with going below 14 and a half? You can't get the angle and you can't get a proper V. It's nothing to do with trying to line Kinseys or John Deere's pocketbooks, because there's lots of you guys out there running 14-inch blades. Lots of them. But when I start digging in the field, I can tell right away. When you change the blade, it's supposed to be shimmed properly. Does everybody know what that means? You're supposed to have a certain amount of closure. Closure happens, you can test closure by putting a piece of paper in this way and a piece of paper in this way. If you're smart, you'll have two pieces of paper. And then you measure the distance between the paper. Does anybody know what that measurement's supposed to be? Today, that measurement is inch to inch and a half between the paper. We attain that by the shims that are behind the seed blades and on this side of the seed blade bolt, and we obtain that by moving that back and forth, okay? In between the two blades is a center scraper. We call it a center scraper. It used to be called a seed tube protector in the book. That seed tube protector should never be called that. It is a center scraper. The main function, though, is to keep those blades spread at a proper V. If that gets wore, the blades start to come in, and then again we start to get a V in. One of the bad effects that most people don't understand is a lot of these row units now, when that scraper gets wore, the blades start coming in and they actually start to physically wear the row unit. I had a customer 2 years ago call me up. He'd broken 31 of 32 seed tubes in one day. He'd broken 19 the day before. I said, shut that planter down. You get on the radio, you get a hold of Jeff, and you shut that planter down instantly, because you're just going to break all 32 when you put them back in. The center scraper was so wore, the blades were coming in, pinching the seed tube and pulling it upward and breaking the hook off the seed tube. If they would have spent the $10 on the center scraper when they put new blades on that winter, they would have saved however many seed tubes that is, and they lost the whole day. In our business, we are so particular about that adjustment. When you get a new blade, it is coated with paint, and they dip them. The paint is not even. We take each blade we do, and we do thousands of blades in our facility a year, and we scrape the edge of it with a utility knife. Hold the utility knife 90 degrees to the edge of the blade, go all the way around. It takes about 5 seconds to do each blade. If you don't do that and you can do one round in the field, that paint is then gone. Your 1.5 inch measurement that you worked so hard at in the wintertime is now gone also. And do not listen to the sales guys that tell you you're supposed to do that measurement with a playing card or a business card. I've listened to that for years at seminars and online. It is too thick. You need to use a normal piece of paper. That is a critical adjustment on a row unit. Parallel arms and bushings. You guys are all into fairly new equipment out here for this business. In Ontario, we're not. That's a common thing, okay? Every 2 years or so on these planters, you should be tightening up all the parallel bolts. I don't care what you own, whether it's a drill, whether it's a sprayer, I don't care what it is. If it has parallel linkages, I don't care how big they are or how small they are, they need to be checked. Why? Because simple physics tells you that every time that goes up and down, you're trying to move that bushing underneath there. And if you ever get to turn that bushing, that's what's loosening your bolt off. You need to tighten these up. There is a torque in the book. We don't follow it in our business. We find that that torque is not enough. What happens if you don't do it? Does anybody know? It goes crooked in the field, yeah. We've seen planters going down the field with 7 bolts in them. They don't toe straight. So all of a sudden you're wondering why your seed placement's not so good. The worst part though is as soon as they come loose, the bushing starts to go crooked and it starts to wear these arms. And I'm here to tell you, if you own John Deere, and I'm not bashing them, those 2 arms and all those bolts, you're gonna have between $650 and $700 a row invested. You're gonna check that, you're gonna do the blades, Check and make sure that this is adjusted properly. Does anybody know what the adjustment on a gauge wheel for a blade is? Just barely touching. Is this one just barely touching? 20 years ago, no, it's actually too tight. 20 years ago, we did them all like this. You should be able to turn that, and that should turn the blade. That's how we did them 20 years ago. The new Kinsey row unit only touches right at the bottom where the soil is at. Do you know why that would be? John Deere's never taken this approach. Kinsey has taken it for over 10 years now. This is wearing the tire all the way around. If you have it too tight and you're in heavy going and with a lot of down pressure, you're going to peel the edge off this gauge wheel. And your maintenance costs are just going to fly through the roof. Shim it out so it's just nicely touching. And that's all done. With this one, it's with a simple wrench. With most of them, the older ones, it's with shims. Don't let your tail stalks get too loose. If your tail stalks start to get teardropped out on the bushings, then you will not probably wear even, and that will not be following true. And that's an infield adjustment you need to make. You should be doing that before you go to the field to plant, where you drop the planter down, go ahead as slow as you can. We do it on a high piece of ground at our facility. And make sure the driver is driving perfectly straight. Make sure all the bearings are good in the wintertime. I had a customer last year, bought a used planter from us. He called up after he planted his white beans. You guys probably don't grow white beans out here, but they're a high-end crop. You're going to invest a lot of money and time into them. Planted all 40 acres of his white beans. When he got done, he realized one of these wasn't turning. If you know anything about white beans, that row is probably not coming up. He blamed us. It was a used planter. Yes, the bearing did go. It was bought field ready. The bearing should have lasted at least 1 year. But do you not think that after 40 acres, you would have looked behind you at least once? Has anybody seen what looks like behind a planter in tilled ground when one of these stops turning? It's obvious, isn't it? So if you can't turn around in 40 acres, and I wonder if he called the seed company up and blamed them because that one row didn't grow. Like we said yesterday, all the bad seed was in one row, wasn't it? Happens all the time. But it was our fault because that bearing went. It's not our fault. Bearings are going to go. These guys need to turn around and look. One of the big things we push in our facility is wiring. As a dealer for any major company, we do not get paid for cut wires on planters because we're tying them up. It's our job to put them on and tie them up. I can look at any Kinsey planter in Ontario and tell you if it went through one of my shops at a glance. We are the only ones that wire tie a certain way on row units. 90% of the sensors that get cut occur through the parallel linkage areas. We sell sensors now that are $300 a row. If you buy a new planter from me and the wire gets cut in the first year, you don't want me out there soldering it, do you? You want it replaced, don't you? That's $300 out of my department because one of my guys did not wire tie it properly. I was at a planter 3 years ago in Keswick, 16-row planter that a competition, brand new planter that the competition had sold. 8 out of 16 wires were cut the first day. I have not had a cut wire on a row unit in at least 5 years. $300 a row, and 8 of them were cut the first day. That's $2,400 that dealership should have been out. It's big money now. We do not allow white wire ties on any planter that goes in and out of our shop. If I catch a white wire tie on a planter that leaves one of my shops, it's a fail. Not UV resistant. Only use the black ones. Throw the TSC ones out of the into the garbage. They are only good for stuff inside. You may not like what I'm saying, but it's true. Also, we quit using Taiwanese wire ties in our shop about 4 years ago. I was buying them for 1/3 of the price of Panduits. We buy tens of thousands of wire ties in my shop every year. And I kicked them out, told them never to bring them back. As we were installing them, we had ones breaking. I cannot have a $150,000 or $250,000 planter going out the door with wire ties that may or may not break. I only buy Panduits now. Every year, we see this bunch of wires and hoses. Constantly, we see it down here. Go to Princess Auto. They sell a white bungee cord. Don't use tarp straps, they break. There's a white bungee cord in an assortment pack there. It's got blue lines through it. They're about 12, 15 bucks. I have those bungee cords on my farm that are over 20, 25 years old. Have never broke, probably never will. Throw the tarp straps away. Everything here should be fastened so that no matter how you turn, it never goes in. Every single year I go out and fix this wire here. Cut right off. And I'll say, well, you can't leave it dangling down like that. Well, why not? I've had it there for 15 years. I charge $90 to start my truck up, $85 when I'm out there. You just spent, if you're close to me, you just spent probably 300 bucks for me to come out and solder it all back together. Hoses, same thing. When the rubber's off of them and they're starting to rust, the metal is starting to rust, they're going to fail. Eventually, they're going to fail. Make sure that everything is wire tied properly. Look at that job up there. Nothing is in a spot that it could be pinched at. It has to be checked every single year. All right, we're going to do in-field. Here's where the politically correctness goes right out the window. So when you go to the field, you've got your planter out. It's all fancied up. You want to show the neighbors what you can do. Whether it's a new planter to you, a brand new planter, or the planter you've had before. When you go to the field that first day, do you fill the planter right up? Majority of people, 90% of them probably say yes. They fill that thing right to the hilt and they go to the field. So now we're at the field, we've got a great big heavy planter. It's going to be pretty easy to set up, isn't it? When you go to the field, you should be no more than a quarter full. The main reason is anybody can set up a full planter. It's really easy to do. Down pressure is easy, everything's easy. Lots of weight, hammers it in the ground, life's wonderful. When you plant it out though, you've stopped looking because you've already checked it the first couple rounds when it's full and then you quit looking. And all of a sudden when it's a quarter full or an eighth full, things aren't going so well and you don't even know it because you're so happy because you checked it the first couple rounds. Go to the field quarter full. What is the first thing you honestly check? Everybody does that, checks the depth. Okay? What I want you to remember, any piece of equipment really that you pull with a tractor, you start at the drawbar and you work your way back. The very first adjustment you should be doing is the level, bar none, because every time you change the level of that planter, every other single adjustment gets affected. Every year I get people that have planters for 3 or 4 days and they call me up and they rip me a new one. The planter's a piece of junk, I can't get it adjusted. If you don't level it first, you will never get it adjusted. You will be chasing your tail. I can adjust a planter within an hour in a field, no problem. Should be done in the first round. What are we trying to level? Frame. Back in Ontario, they all talk about leveling the tongue. That was great back in the little 4-row days. You cannot do that anymore. If you own a John Deere 1770 front fold or a 7200, that hitch is going to be, the 2-point hitch is going to be 3 feet off the ground. You can't level it. It's got a bow. If you own a Kinsey 3600, 32 row, you're not going to have it level. That tongue's going to have a swoop in it. The frame is what you want to level. Level to the ground, not level to the earth. There's a difference. So you're going to take this here and you're going to have it parallel to the ground. On this particular planter, we don't have the bracket back here that holds the seed can because it's a central fill. So we don't have the luxury of seeing that piece too. But this is actually level 2. Okay? So we want this level to the earth, or level to the ground. What is level to the earth? That's a spirit level, right? You guys think you're level out here. So does Essex County back home. You're not level. Parallel to the ground. I had one customer, he says, I'm going to Princess Auto, I'm getting me a level, I'm going to rivet it on the side of that row unit, and then I'll always know what I have. He's way up in Peterborough area in Great Big Hills. I says, don't you do that. You don't own a level piece of ground anywhere. I can put a golf ball any place you farm, and it's going to roll the bottom of the hill. Not level the earth, level the ground, parallel the ground. Why? This is what you need to know. Why is this the most important adjustment you're going to make? It adjusts your seed tube. The seed tube comes down on a curve right here. Everybody know that? Almost every make is like that. Think about this, guys. The majority of the planters planting in the fields are front low, rear high. When that happens, your seed tube is angled up. You're now pointing that seed halfway up the trench. Is it going to be in the bottom of the trench all the time? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Some planters do not have the luxury of being on a 2-point hitch, so it is not infinite. You have to make some adjustments. If you have to make an adjustment and one way it seems a little bit low on the front and one way it seems a little bit high, what do you think you should opt for? We want to be a little bit high on the front for the seed tube, a little bit up if you have to be. I'd rather be perfectly level, perfectly parallel to the earth or the ground, but I can live with a little bit up if you have to. The reason why this is so important is every other adjustment you make, whether it be fertilizer colders, nose mount colders, down pressure, everything, seed depth, every other adjustment is affected by level. So as soon as you get messing around 3 to 4 days in the season and you change that level, you're now starting over again. Okay? If the level's not right, nor will anything else be. What's the next thing we should check? It's the down pressure. Every year I get multiple calls. Your planter's no good. I changed the seed depth, nothing's happening. I'm planting the beans, they're only going in a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch into the ground. Sometimes I'm 2 inches deep. There is no depth control. Your planter's a piece of junk. Does not matter. I'm down here now. Does not matter where I put them. I'm still only 1/2 inch in the ground. What's wrong with the planter? If there's no weight on these wheels, if you stop and you can, with the planter in the ground, and you can lift that wheel up, that is a depth stop. If it's 1 inch from the depth stop, is there enough pressure on that row unit to get it down into the ground? No. Every time you make an adjustment here, it should change the seed depth. When the planter's down, when we go the other 150 feet and the planter's stopped and down, we want to be able to just turn this barely. It should take a lot of strength to turn it. But we don't want it so that we can go like this. And that is really common. How do we adjust that? How do we put more down pressure on it? With this particular unit, we simply jump in the cab, hit the button, and increase the pressure on the airbags. If it's a corn planter, that's probably all you're going to have to do, or adjust the manual springs. In your book, it'll show you how to do that. How do you know when you've got enough? Get out and check it again. If you have too much, what's the problem? How do you tell if you've got too much? It will actually, if you take a brand new planter, they'll have lines in the rubber, and you'll actually see that in the shine on the ground if it's a little bit tacky too, especially if it's no-till. But you'll just see that you're pushing in far too hard. Back it off a little bit till you know, and then the other thing is you won't be able to even try to move this. You can just see the whole planter's down too low. On a corn planter, you're very rarely going to ever have not enough weight on the machine to push you down. That's another reason why this has to be done when you're 1/4 full. If you're full to the top with everything, that's what's shoving the weight down on the planter. So if you have to increase the down pressure, you have enough weight on top to push it down. But if you're only 1/4 full, it's going to show you whether or not you have enough weight. In beans, it's a real problem in Ontario because we have these massive planters like this, and yet we might not be able to put them down to the ground. Okay? If you own one of these planters and you've got the bean rows, I'm here to tell you, you better be looking out for this end of the planter right here in beans if you're no-tilling. It's going to ride up. Anybody know why? Not enough weight. All the weight is in the center of the planter. There is no weight transfer system. If you own a blue planter of this size, there will be a weight transfer system shoving that wing down so that there's equal weight across the whole width of it. This is a major problem on the green planters and on a couple of the other makes too. But it gets the most talk on Ag Talk because of that. You need a way to get this wing down. What's the simplest way in tough going to put weight on the wing? Water tank. You can take the weight out in a second, simply open the tap up, drive to the field while it's pouring out. It's not a lot of fun slugging weights. What we find with the people that use weights is they tend to stay on when they even don't need them. The water guys, they open that water up. As soon as they don't need them, they get a 1/2 inch of rain, they open that water up. You need a plan A, B, and C, because probably plan A and B aren't going to work. So, we've got the down pressure set. What's the next thing we're going to adjust? Now we're going to do our seed depth. And at the same time, we should probably be doing a population check. In my service truck, I have 8 sets of chains. I went to the hardware store, I bought dog chain. You know the chain that they hang lights from? There it is, right up there. We call it dog chain in our shop. I put ends on it from a tarp strap. I simply take a row, pick a row, I lift this up, I put the hook through something, I drive down the field. But before I do that, The real trick is shallow this up so you're only planting about 1/4 inch. Have the guy get up to ground speed. After he gets up to ground speed, just look back, make a mental note of where it was, make sure he goes at least another 25 feet, jump out, find the seed. How many feet on a 30-inch row to get 1/1000th of an acre? The actual measurement is 17 feet 5 inches. Might make a difference of 1,000 because one seed is 1,000, guys. You should know that measurement. If you do the population check this way, it will only take you a few minutes. What's the last thing you should adjust in field? We're only talking seed. We're not going to get into fertilizer and everything else. Down pressure on the closing wheels. When I'm in the field digging up seed, you will only ever see me use my finger. Why is that? If you're digging it up with a pocket knife or a screwdriver, you cannot tell how much you've pushed, how much compaction you've done in there. If I'm in your field and I pull the keys out of my pocket that are always in my pocket when I'm in my service truck, and I start digging with my keys, you're in trouble. If I cannot dig it up with my finger, even in hard clay, is it in there too stiff? Probably. How fast do you all plant corn? I know we're in a John Deere building and everything else, but the 10-speed planter within the industry for people like myself, I don't care whether you're John Deere, Case, Kinsey, I don't care who you are, but the people within the industry that work in it every day, it is not a funny thing. It is a joke to us. Why? How can I tell you in honesty that you can take that planter out and plant at any certain speed? I can tell you where you should be planting, but every field condition is differently. You can take any planter on the market and put on those attachments that are on that planter and make a 10-mile-an-hour planter. Should you? When we sell a planter just like this, and the guy says to me, I've got vacuum now, I've got hydraulic downforce, I've got all these other things. Can I plant 10 mile an hour now? The first thing I say is no. You plant to the conditions. If that row unit is bouncing, you're in trouble. This is your finger pickup. From the factory, John Deere and Kinsey finger pickup meters will only test at 96%. When I say testing, we have a computerized stand at our facility and we run 1,000 seeds through it. We use the population that you tell us to use, the ground speed you tell us to use, and we use the seed size that's in we use either like a medium round or a medium flat, and we ask you what you mostly buy and we use that seed size. So we can simulate your field conditions as far as the speed at which this thing runs and everything else. We also do it for vacuum meters, believe it or not, and that's what that test is. We'll go over that in a couple minutes. From the factory, Kinsey and John Deere meters will only test at 96%. They will not pass. A pass in our meter stand is 98.5. All we need to do to make that pass, by the way, is we simply replace this. On a John Deere or a Kinsey, that plate is steel. Also inside is a set of fingers. A company called Precision Planting makes these products. They put money into finger pickups in the last 10 years. John Deere and Kinsey have not put a dime into finger pickup research in the last 10 years, and they have publicly stated they will not anymore. Okay? So I can replace those two items in here and take that meter from 96 to 99 point something percent just by doing that. That will cost you about an extra $110, I think it is, to replace that. A lot of people think they have good finger pickups. We throw them on our test stand. It's nothing to see something in the low 90s. Think about that for cost. The way we figure out the cost of loss and what it's costing you per acre and what the benefit is to change it, let's say your finger pickup tests 95%. If I can throw the product in there and I get 99% right away, that's a 4% difference. We take half of that to be conservative, and we say that you're going to gain 2% on yield. We'll touch on the slide right now. The slide is for this meter right here. Okay, John Deere vacuum. So Pride contacted me last fall, I think it was, and they said, we've got a customer in Manitoba and he wants to buy 4 lots of the same variety, and we want to make sure we treat him right, and we want to make sure that he's got his planter set up right. We don't want any screw ups. Would you be willing to do a test for us and figure out what he should be using? And we said, yeah, no problem. We hire it out all the time. So I laid the test out, but one of the things that my boss said to me was, you need to run a Pro Max 40 in that test. Pride came to us and asked us to run 2 plates, the small corn and the standard corn. I'm not as versed on a John Deere vacuum meter as my boss is, Matt. And he said, you got to put a ProMax 40 in there. I said, yeah, no problem, I'll run it by him. They said, well, we're not really interested in that because we don't have ProMax 40 plates. And we said, well, we're going to run it anyways, just so we can show you. So remember I said that a 98.5 for us is not a pass? In my personal opinion, a vacuum meter should always run at 99% or better. This is just a summary of the test. What we did was we took that small plate and we ran that lot of seed, but we started off and we changed the first thing we would have done is change the vacuum. The second thing we would have done is done an array of the same test with a change on the singulator. The third thing we would have done is change the ground speed. So as you can see, each individual test would have been quite extensive. Notice the ground speed. What is every single one of them at? That was the best. 5. This is a vacuum in a controlled setup, not bouncing, not moving, not doing anything. This vacuum should be able to run 15 miles an hour. But it was showing us consistently that 5 miles an hour was the best. Now, I'm not saying that at 6 or 7 miles an hour, I wasn't getting 100% on this. What I was saying with this results is that was the most consistent spot at which we were running. As you can see, the apprehension about the ProMax 40 plate was unfounded, wasn't it? It clearly won each individual test. Now, the standard plate did pretty good here. It did 100%, and it did 99.7, and it did 99.9. But on that one, it barely passed. Remember what I said? A vacuum should always be over 99%. Do the math on what it figures out to. You got to buy a plate anyways. Doesn't matter to me if you have the other plate, but always try to figure out what is the best. So is it not much simpler for this gentleman to walk in here and buy the ProMax and put it in his planter and leave it there? There are other options you can do. If it's strictly a corn planter, we promote this. This is much different than a normal planter. This is called an ESAT. That will beat the ProMax 40 in most conditions. Just because we got 100% on all 4 of these doesn't mean we're always going to get it. The ESAT, we call that an ESAT, it will beat the ProMax 40 in most conditions. The downside of the ESAT is you have to disassemble some of it if you want to plant soybeans with it. Okay, so it's a little bit of work in that regard. When you start monkeying with different plates though, you have to start affecting the vacuum. So you can look at these initial settings and say that I was out to lunch on my vacuum settings because you're not supposed to have to run a John Deere at that high of a vacuum. First of all, the ProMax, you're probably going to have to increase your vacuum a little bit. Look at where we're running here, 15, 13, 13, 12. So you can see that in our results we actually found, and we went down lower than 10 with our testing, but we actually found that a little bit higher vacuum did well. If you're going to change to ESAT, spend the money, change the gauge. Don't sit there and crank the vacuum up and say, oh, that's close enough. Change the gauge out. One of the things I want you guys to leave here with is what's new. The 2 big things that we see that we're excited about are hydraulic downforce and electric drive meters. That's the 2 big things that we are doing backflips over. In 10 years, our prediction is almost every planter sold will be electric. Why? When you buy a planter, the first thing you're going to tell me is you want to put a clutch shut-off on it, a row shut-off, so you don't overlap, especially in corn. Overlap in corn costs you big dollars, but you've also taken that $300 bag of corn and wasted it. We have customers that have gone from 4-row banks on their planters of shutting rows off to single-row banks and said they paid for that change in 1 year in seed savings. Okay? So now you're going to buy that planter and you're going to put electric clutch on it, and that's $500 a row, maybe a little bit more with installation. And now you've still got all your normal drives on it, whether it be hydraulic drives or ground drives. By the way, I'm not a real fan of hydraulic drive. You probably got it. You probably got it. Any ideas why, as a service person, I'm not a real fan of hydraulic drive? Startup is not instant. Electric is instant. It instantly slows down, it instantly speeds up. It is exactly what your GPS is. As good as hydraulic is, they have not made it so it's instant. So your jump start on your corners is not the best sometimes, is it? When you back that planter into a corner and you start from scratch, your population's not bang on for the first few feet, is it? If you're running a hydraulic ground drive and you're running a consistent ground speed, the word of advice I'm going to give you if you're using GPS, prescription, and all that kind of stuff is know your shaft speed. Why do I say that? When you're running 5 miles an hour, if you're running, let's say, a 32 RPM shaft speed, if you lose your GPS and you don't know what your shaft speed should have been for that population, because now you're not going to have any speed input, so you can't go out and plant, can you? But if you know your shaft speed, you can go plant all day long, and you're still going to be at 32,000, aren't you? I don't know what's happening out here, but last year in Ontario, we had days where the GPSs were acting up so bad that we don't know whether it was solar flares, we don't know what it was. But there was periods in the day where people could not plant if they were relying on strictly GPS. When we sell a planter, we want it to always be fail-safe. So you want, if you don't put markers on that planter, is it fail-safe? No. Because I'm telling you, if you got a 40 or 60 foot planter and you can get that guess row right, you're pretty good if you've got no GPS. Okay, so that to us is a fail-safe thing. Electric clutches, you need electricity to shut them off. That means it's fail-safe, right? Because if you don't have electricity, if you've cut that wire, it's on. Air clutches. The air clutch system that we sell is from True Count. It is fail-safe. If you lose your air compressor in the middle of a day, and that happens quite a bit, that clutch will activate and go. You're simply back to your old school method of stopping on the ends. So as a company, we tend to promote things we can do what we call fail-safe. We do not look at the things that are not fail-safe. So think about, if I lose my GPS, if I lose this, if I lose that, what am I going to do? On your hydraulic systems, there's a way you can manually set that on your servo. There should be a little tap there. If there's any problems in North America, in the US of A, you will lose your satellites. Be prepared for it. Maybe not for very long, but it's really nice to keep going planting on a nice day. So back to the electric drives. So electric drive, we now eliminate the hydraulic drive, we eliminate the ground contact drive, we eliminate the electric clutch that we're buying, we eliminate all that stuff, and we can variable rate. Are they reliable? We're going into our 3rd season with them, or 4th season with them. I haven't done a service call on an electric drive yet. Hydraulic downforce. Why would I be so high on that? In Ontario, we are extremely variable soils. We go from clay on the headland to muck in the hollow to sand hill to a clay knoll to a clay flats to a silt hollow to whatever. And it can vary on a 2,000 foot field, it can vary 6 times from front to back. It's almost impossible to get the proper down pressure. So how do we adjust it? We adjust it for the hardest conditions. We don't want to leave seed on top of the ground, right? We hope that in the softer conditions that the gauge wheels will hold the row unit up. Hydraulic downforce takes that concern away. Those are the 2 big things we see. There's a whole ton of other things coming on the market. A lot of it's really cool, but those are the ones, they're not cheap, either one of them, but you're gaining a lot in order to get it. In Ontario, we have problems with what we call hairpinning, especially if a guy's in reduced tillage in corn. In other words, he's shoving corn stalks down into the trench, and when that happens, that corn stalk is sucking up moisture from around everything. So if you've got a seed plant sitting right beside or right underneath a piece of trash, that seed will have trouble emerging. So the trash wheels are meant to kind of clear the trash. We don't want to move much dirt. In fact, if you've got your trash wheels adjusted perfectly, we say they should only be probably turning half the time. What does hydraulic do for us then? Hydraulic is the same thing. It adjusts on the go through the field. Closing wheels. There's 100 different closing wheels on the market. I do not like the ones with straight spikes. When they go in the ground, being a spike, they actually pull and push the seed. If you're going under the ground on your closing system, are you not disturbing the seed? There are, however, a couple that I really do like. We sell everything west of our location, so towards Windsor, Detroit, we sell almost everybody cast closing wheels. When I ask the majority of the farmers in those areas why they use cast closing wheels, there's one main answer: so that I can close the trench. Anybody know why we can't close the trench? Especially in no-till? Too wet. If it's so wet that the trench isn't closing, you shouldn't be doing it. Now, on the other side of that, I have seen it where it's dry, where the trench is going to close hard, and in that case, they work excellent. So know why you're using them.